Hello and welcome everybody to a very special episode of Orange Card, Blue Card. I have your most recent North American regional winner, the winner of Atlanta, Kevin Broberg, played Irwin Smith, primarily on the death symbol. Kevin, how are you feeling today right now?
I'm feeling pretty good. I just got that. I got some groceries. I had some dinner.
I just
And
kicked
yeah,
my
getting an
light
excuse to talk
cord.
about universes is my favorite thing.
Um yeah, I know that you played a very interesting list in Atlanta, and I know that people want to hear all about that. But there's also a very nice interview you did with UK Versus, so I don't want to obsess over it too much. But I think that that's a good jumping off point because it is, for all intents and purposes, the last competitive event for a lot of people. It's going to mark the end of their competitive season. Not everyone is going to nationals, but what did you think about the overall format, both going into the event and after the event? Did anything change about your perception of the format?
I think my perception of honestly my own deck. I think I underestimated it going in. Certainly, I think I was getting very lucky in a lot of spots. Um, but it's a deck that's very hard to play and gives you a lot of opportunities to get lucky. So it's kind of hard to judge exactly, what level I was performing at relative to, what was possible. Um, the format rather is violent. Like we are playing a fighting game, and it is a game where, you show up and you are not always necessarily going to have the option to do anything but get punched in the face and perish. Right. One of the things I loved about the Attack on Titan, well, like the experience of playing the first couple weeks of the Attack on Titan format was playing against the Flying Titan and playing Spotlight format and playing against the Flying Titan and feeling like I was getting killed. Like I was getting like I was Aaron's mom. I was getting picked up out of the rubble and swallowed. And it's like such the vibes of the series with that. But it's not just one deck. It's kind of everything in this format is kind of nuts. Everything is, and I've been kind of having this copium that there's a lot of exciting things. There's a lot of powerful things. There's a lot of cards that you sit up when you sit up straight when you read them. You're like, holy crap, they really print this. Are we really allowed to play with this kind of card? And sometimes the gameplay experience of that, it's kind of balanced on a knife's edge. There are competitive games. There are games that are very interesting and go long, but you have to fight to be able to be allowed to play a long game. You have to be able to, you get a lot of mileage out of having this threat of winning on turn two that makes your opponent, spend their resources. You need kind of this. There's a lot of back and forth, but it's a lot of back and forth balanced on this factor of you might just lose if you step wrong or if you play with too little respect for what your opponent's doing, and that's intense sometimes. So it's an intense format. Maybe is a good word to describe it with. Um,
Yeah, going into Atlanta, I was pretty excited because I knew that no matter what, we weren't going to be playing the same decks as before. I knew that, the shakeup of Attack on Titan was at least real enough that you weren't going to be playing the same style of deck. And while there might not have been a ton of surprises about which characters were at the forefront, I would argue that there were a ton of surprises as far as cards that were not included, cards that were considered to be staple. The way card gamers talk is you have to do this, and oh, you just cape the thing, you just answered this card. And I don't know if it was purely the threat or players just found different ways to go around it, but there was a lot of detail in what was not included in a lot of those decks, and the success that you can have if you aren't a, I won't say meta slave, but if you don't just listen to the rhetoric, right? Because there was definitely a rhetoric
yeah.
of you have to be playing barrier shield, you have to be playing cape of no return, you have to have your attack negates, and you have to one for one every card that gets played, and yada yada yada. I mean, I just, we didn't see that many copies of dissolving the conflict in Top Cuts, which people were really big on. Like, you just bounce attacks and Toru 2 as the freest, all the rhetoric, right? There's a lot of stuff that I think if you look more at what's missing, the absence of certain things, you get a much better picture of what this format's really about.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that's true kind of on a down to the scale of individual decks. Very much so. I think the Sorbin deck, the story of the Sorbin deck was all the cards I cut out of it that I tried and was really excited to play, and then said, well, if I want to be the deck that plays Twisting Azure Inferno the best, if I want to commit to what my deck is here, what I'm here to do, well, I should stop being cute and playing on the margins and say, well, let's trim it down to the most efficient pieces so I can get my get the defense I can try to need in, get enough defense in, but really get what I'm here to do out of the way first. Um, and yeah, I think I think the format is incredible. It's really, honestly, it's literally incredible. It is I hard to say that we've had a more startlingly diverse format where the two best decks in the room, I think, broadly were considered to be Rodan and Smiling Titan, and they did show up with 3 copies and 2 copies in the top cuts. And then we had like multiple C tier characters in the top cuts, right? Like it's insane. Um, we had a bunch of in terms of absence, we had a bunch of top tier characters like Pony who just did not quite make it to Sunday. Even with the top 16 cut, it's just a crazy event. It's such a broad open format. There's so much play to, it's intense. It's not for everyone necessarily, but there's a lot to love. There's a lot to I don't know. I'm really happy with obviously how it turned out, but also it's there's a lot of great things to see in this format.
Yeah, and to prove that it's not just strictly a power creep issue either, there was still a Toga 3 on Chaos in top 4 who made a really deep run playing probably the most similar list. Maybe the most uh, redundant might not be the right word, but a list from Collinsville that you might expect to see. And I even got hung up on the one or two new inclusions from that deck, and the player actually commented on my video talking about that and said, it's just the format's fast enough. My deck not interested in a long game, not really prepared for it because things should not progress that far. And it's got a lot of what I was expecting. It's got a lot of the Cape of No Return, the one of Genkai's cards that play defense without blocking, and even that deck was surprising to me that it's not leaning heavily on risky encounters. It's only really expecting to play one per game because again the 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 length of the game is being determined by how aggressive this deck is, right? So you've got decks that are really all over the scale. You've got the Rodans blew me away, absolutely blew me away by not playing Cape of No Return. But that's a card that just sits in play, and your opponent knows how to play around it, right? Or they know that they have to play through it. And while I personally would say make them do it, the strength of Rodan a lot of the times is you're not necessarily going to know how much defensive output they have. The top card of their deck is known to them, but not to you, and there's so many
Yeah,
games that Rodan clutches out because they check a supersonic when they're blocking with their last card in hand, and it's stuff like that that you see all the time. Um,
Rodan hurts my feelings, man. That character is why is he allowed to be this good? It's crazy.
it is crazy, right? So that's you've got the deck that is probably the most balls to the wall aggro. You've got the decks that are the most defensive first we've had since the MHA reboot. I really don't think there's any character as the speed reduction output of Rodan. Not on every attack. Um, and then
I was about to nitpick that Malfoy does, but yeah.
yeah, and then in the top 4 we had the Smiling Titans, go pretty much about as far as they could. They both ran into you in top 4 and top 2. So it's it's funny because people get upset when they see like the known entities, but that means that players are addressing the format correctly, and I feel like that gives us a better opportunity to actually prepare and have legitimate games, less non-games if we understand what's good. And that's like where a meta builds from, right? That's like the foundational good side of having a meta game. So it's the kind of world where if no Smiling Titans made top cuts and no Rodans made top cuts and we just had no idea what was going on with all these decks, so many people would be completely hyped, but it would probably be the highest quantity of like non games of like well, this deck is doing its own thing that no one's prepared for, and this deck is doing its own thing. Because if we're not understanding what's good in the game, then it's hard to iterate and build your deck. Does that make sense? Am I off
I
base
think
here?
that makes sense, but it's really an interesting reflection on what was kind of just at the forefront of my mind as I was hearing you talk about that, which is kind of that even like we say, well, we people get frustrated with like the known quantities, right? Oh, Smiling Titan, of course, Smiling Titan's going to top this tournament, whatever. And then you look at, well, then you ask them, so how do you build your Smiling Titan deck?
Right.
And maybe they have their answers, maybe their explanations. And you look at the second and third place finishers in this tournament, and they're actually very different decks. They're actually approaching the game almost not. I can't say they're approaching the game in different directions or anything. They're both playing a lot of invincible bodies. They're both playing a
Hmm.
number of invincible bodies. They're playing a different number. And like, they're both playing weapon clash. They're both playing like cards that help you pass your checks with your Smiling Titan. But they're honestly very different decks, and they're honestly like approaching the game in very different ways, and they're approaching matchups in very different ways. I'm sure, uh, and I wonder how. And I think that's another testament to the format is that there are different ways to play these even the top decks. These Rodan lists have varied a lot. We saw we saw actually two symbols of Rodan, all symbol and void symbol. One of them was like co-Smith Champ with me at 602. Um, but then the Void decks look very different. That's like metagame Liberation Army. They put two pillars and top guts. That's a great accomplishment. Uh, but I was kind of just thinking to myself too of like, well, we see these results, and I think one thing I get frustrated with a lot is people get very results oriented. They say, well, this deck won, and so it must have been fate that they were going to win. They must have been guaranteed that if we played
Yeah.
this tournament 100 times, they would win 100 times. And they don't say it like that because that's obviously absurd. I really wonder if you just like took the top 16 and just like shook it around and just like scrambled the seeds and scrambled the bracket and played it 100 times, how much of a spread you'd get, how different things might look.
Yeah,
Um,
I think Tam Cardwell does something like that on his stream with Barrett. They do at least like run it back with the top eights of different events. So that's similar. But yeah, I feel the same way. I feel a lot of the same way just because every time I hear about like the number one best deck, especially the aggro decks, winning an event, um, if you follow the event coverage and that deck is on stream like more than once or twice, you can almost always spot some moment where like magic had to happen. You can
yeah,
always talk to a winner of an event, and almost always the first words out of their mouth are, "Man, thank goodness my opponent misplayed in my winning in," or something like that. Even early rounds, one big mistake can put you on the right bracket, the right path, better tiebreakers, things like that that can keep a tournament run alive. And so, yeah, I it's very very funny to me that a lot of the takeaway from from this event was that Irwin only gives two speed to these attacks, and people are completely disregarding the attune symbols and how they impact the format and your deck building. Um,
I love hearing it every time someone says, "Oh, Attune centralizes the metagame. Oh, Attune makes every deck the same." It's like, boy, howdy, you never read Aaron's trial either, did you?
right, right. And that was such a clutch card multiple turns in a row. And and again, almost every tournament run I've heard about where someone even made a deep run. I myself played in a lot of events where something really huge has to happen for me. Um, I've had personally, I've had people countering my deck, like building their deck to counter my deck, and the only reason I was able to get a tie or a 1-0 victory was because they had a game rules infraction that ended in a game loss. And
Mm.
like my deck has no chance at winning. They just messed up. Uh in the last webcam event, George Zhang didn't cancel my true 100% response. That would have just killed me because I have no recourse after the block step. And I didn't even realize
It,
it till he realized it.
I have a perfect one of these from Atlanta. I played against Will Anderson in the round six. Winning that round put me on the path to Swiss champing and then having the perfect bracket lineup. Um, and he literally had double tri gravity beam, and he took a like +2 high block out of my hand instead of hostile introductions because he thought it was also a high block. It was a card he wasn't deeply familiar with, and the foil pattern or whatever looked red to him, so he took the high block, and I just full block his attack. He says, "Oh, I don't have lethal anymore," and
Wow.
so I go from losing to winning, and I go on to double draw and first seed.
Yeah, so
And then he gets
that's
paired to Mothra and gets 1-0'd by Mothra in Top Cuts. Like,
right.
two decks that I don't know. I haven't checked Bill's bracket, but credibly, his Ghidorah deck is prepared to fight Smiling Titan. He clearly had a bunch, like, there were Smiling Titans in the field, and he got to Top Cuts even with a loss in round 6. Like,
I can almost guarantee that if you swapped like George Zhang to the other side of the bracket, or George Zhang had like your path, and you were just on the other side of the bracket, and his Mothra deck didn't have to play a 7-hand size stun deck, then like he would
yeah,
have fought 2 Smiling Titans and been absolutely fine. You know, like would have aced the tournament, and everyone would have been like, "Wow, Smiling Titan has absolutely no game. Mothra's busted, and 13 difficulty attacks are the only way to play the game now." You know, oh, I gotta worry about 20 speed throws. How do you beat a 9-hander? It's a 9-hand size deck.
yeah.
Um,
I love the when after his deck list, I said, "Well, researching the answer. Which one is researching?" He says, "Oh, it's the +1 hazards." We're like, "Wow, you have 4 of this card? That's crazy.
that
You just
is
discard the
crazy.
extras because you're."
It's crazy, but you can turn it on turn 1 with that deck.
It's so good. Yeah,
It is so good. It's one
it's
of the
like
only. I think that and new training method are like the only 4 ofs.
it's so obvious in retrospect. There are 4 Ultra Regens in the deck. I'm certain.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, that's true.
It's like 80 cards. Like, it's got 4 of the good ones. It's got, if it like draws cards, it's probably got 4 of. Yeah.
I did. I played a slightly modified version at my local championship, and I only lost to a Mirio that I dice rolled with because we went 1-1, and we thought,
Mhm.
and I thought I needed the win to get like the points to qualify for Nats, but he didn't. But afterwards, he told me he was 1-1, and I was 2-0. I was the only 2-0. So I got bumped down to fifth because I lost the dice roll with a bunch of 2-1s. When if I was the only tie, I would have actually just won the local championship. It's a very funny season. This is a very funny year for competitive. But I played the Mothra deck, and like the only thing that was touching me was like the most hyper aggressive, new player. He's a player coming back to the game, so he's playing like a souped up Mirio list because it's like the most straightforward thing, right? And it just dumpstered me turn 2. Um, but yeah, as far as fours go, it's like zero diffs and ultra regen, researching, and new training.
Yeah,
That's
like
it.
jury in there. I guess the attacks and the actions should be
Yeah, well,
4
yeah,
ofs or
yeah, yeah, and
whatever.
the
But
attacks,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But
Foundation base is very wide.
yeah, and I'm super glad that George managed to make top cuts because he lost on stream to I think Gamer Toga, and we got like a really nice meme reaction from him from Levi with the camera. And that game was like super cool, but the whole time I'm like, man, his deck is sweet and it's like so good for this format. If he just doesn't fight any more 7-hand size combined firepower decks, he's good to go. And so I'm glad he made top cut so we could get like the list posted, because that would be a deck that I would want to see if it's like top 16 to 32. Like I think Inasa ended up there. I think that's where Ponies ended up. Like I
Yep.
want to see the decks that were on winning ends that maybe you could make one change, you could make one iteration and make it a little bit better for this format now that you have new, again, going back to like people complaining that known decks are doing well. Like I need to know what decks are doing well so I know how to build my deck, right? And now that I know Rodans aren't going to be playing Cape of No Return, maybe I take the asset hate out of my main board. Like the top one deck, or first place deck had one asset, just Knott's Flask. The Smiling Titans had one battle arena or 2 battle arena and 0 actions and assets in the second place deck. So like maybe I stop putting Hacker in my main board, right? But we don't have really any more competitive events, unfortunately. So I don't think it's really going to matter too much, because by the time we have another event, it's going to be a whole new format with 300 new cards. Attack on
Yeah.
Titan, the new Attack on Titan is only like 180 cards, but there's going to be decks from 3 different franchises,
Yes,
right?
solo
So
leveling's out. Yeah, I mean, just the Tekken starters, the Dark Deku deck's been making waves, right?
it's certainly making a name for itself out the gate. I think it's winning like all the local championships. And I was this close to taking it to mine, but I think the Mothra deck is way cooler, it's way sweeter, and B,
For sure.
I don't. I'm just so committed to not giving my locals a bad time anymore. And the Mothra deck
Mm.
lets them like throw themselves at me and do all their stuff, and it looks very vulnerable. Like it's actually very vulnerable currently to twisting Azure Inferno style decks where it really is like you have to manage the hand size, and Earth doesn't have like repeatable speed hate, so it's tough to actually block 7 attacks. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's
letting
like
them like try to.
especially yeah, like the 6 speed attacks are so uncomfortable. I was trying to play like Mill Mimic and like either Earth or Chaos, and like it just was not there against people playing like Endeavor. Like I can block a
Yeah,
Vile Seizing, maybe like God forbid has Ice Sword Execution or Walk the Dog kind of crap.
yeah. So like when it's Deku and you've got the -3 speed on every attack, it's very much like just a no fly zone depending on how good your hand is. You don't even get to feel like you have a chance, as you said, 2 speed moves. Um, and so yeah, I didn't really want to give them that experience, and I don't think like I think they sent me a list, and it was not on the one shot combo at all, and so they're probably gonna watch this. Hopefully, I hope my locals watch this, but I want them to play Deku how they want before someone just goes, "Oh, here's the stupid combo list where you ignore the opponent for 7 turns and then resolve one attack." I want them to play how they want instead of having someone tell them how to play first.
Yeah, and I love that Deku. He's very open ended. There are a lot of even just in the deck, there's a lot of things you can build around that are exciting, that are like plausible things you can do that aren't even necessarily wrong. It's just like there's also a kind of a strategy you can optimize for, and then say, well, yeah, this is like the answer, and then you can be confident in that. But are you right?
Yeah,
Like I mean, I think this Irwin deck even obviously it won a tournament now, and everyone's going to be copying it, and it's an optimized deck in a certain direction. But I'm sure on Monday I was playing 4x Button Collector and like 3 or 4 Genkai's Guidance, especially after sideboard, and it was like this is my plan A. Is I'm going to Genkai's Guidance. A bunch of people want to play a wall deck. It's like I don't know if I believe in this enough to bring
yeah,
this tournament, and also I don't believe I have it like spot on enough. I certainly don't have it spot on enough compared to it's easier to tune the straightforward aggro deck, but like, because Deku has so many defensive resources, right? There's how do you want to optimize your defensive resources? Well, that's a very wide open question. It's very open dialogue with the metagame you're trying to expect, and so it's more fun that way. Yeah, it's good.
yeah. It's definitely. I've made it a rule where outside of very specific decks that I want to play, I borrow decks from my locals. I just try to take like what they build, so that way it's at least like a more even matchup. I don't even like look through it usually. That way I can just be surprised. I'll ask like, are there 2 checks, right, or something like that.
Yeah,
So that way I'm not influencing them too much, on just having them copy, because they're pretty good about not just net decking lists. They'll take inspiration and they pay attention, but they don't straight up net deck too often. Especially now, it was definitely a lot more common in like set 2, right, when there's no other
sure,
cards to
sure.
play. Um,
Yeah,
but
I should do that more often. I remember I've play a match and then say, hey, let's trade decks and see how it goes.
yeah,
Those kind of things, and just borrow decks from folks and play their decks and stuff. That's a lot of fun, and it's very different than how I like to build decks sometimes. So it can be good to see how the other half lives, so to speak.
that's what I
As long as
do
they don't
when
play like 40 spams. I hate the 40 spam decks. Like what the hell, man?
yeah. That's what
Play
I
some real
do.
cards.
That's what I do when people complain about my character or the deck I'm playing. Is I just say, okay, let's trade. If the
Yeah.
character, so like the last time I played Amajiki, I think I was playing like someone else's Amajiki deck, and they were like, oh, "Of course you'd win. You're playing broken Amajiki," because I gave his attack like -6 speed or something, and I was like, first of all, it's your deck. Like you played it last week and didn't win a game. And then we can trade right now. We can trade decks right now. Like I don't know. I'm not here for it anymore. Like, I would much rather just settle something in game. It won't take that long, you know. Same
Like
thing
how
when I
about
saw
Amajiki? Like does that character like he's still like halfway real, right? There's no
this.
way you can be that good and not be real.
Yeah, well, this was also back probably like right after Nats.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Okay. So a
yeah,
minute
this
ago.
would this would have been right after last nationals. I'm pretty sure. So, but it's stuff like that where
Wait,
I'm
he still had Jolt. Holy crap.
the new Jolt.
Oh.
You're talking about the
Well,
new
no, like
air attack that
last nationals, he would have been before rotation, right? I don't know, whatever.
I don't remember. It's been a long
I don't
time.
remember if people even played Jolt in that deck.
This was almost certainly after Jolt rotated because I remember being a water
Okay.
Amajiki list. So, but
Oh, Water Amachi is so cool. That's another super underrated deck. Like just damage reduction plus referee journey right now. Like chip it, man. It's good.
also dual needle lunge very underrated when your character always wants to count momentum and your opponent is trying to
Mm.
count your momentum the whole time. Also Rodan get fucked. Dual needle lunge just dumps two random cards. So yeah,
Oh
it's kind of a weird pick right now, but I think man, there's it's so hard to look at certain symbols and try to evaluate how good they are because of the attuned symbols. But I think that there's a
yeah,
lot of gems lying in wait because a character like Rinku has three attuned symbols, right? And we were memeing earlier in Discord about him playing like a one attack deck, but like seriously though, realistically, if you had an Amajiki deck that you thought was really good but it needed speed, it just needed like ramping speed or something, like a style that you wanted to play, and you've got a character who actually is getting access to three out of the six symbols from the last two sets, like there's got to be some combination that people just haven't really thought of. He's really Rinku the is really good with card pool clear, and they keep printing it. And a lot of these cards don't do a lot by themselves. And Rinku doesn't say, "Hey, clear your card pool" on his face, right? So there is a world where just drawing a lot of cards, clearing your card pool, having a Mikasa level speed comes together on a turn after you've amassed some momentum. But at the same time, getting those reps in and being able to practice against enough different decks is something that I think is challenging a lot of players right now. And I wanted to ask your opinion. Um, what is something players can do to get better at universes, especially if it's something that isn't just playing more games? Is there anything that players can like focus on or try to do specifically that you think can make them better players overall?
see, I have like 6,000 ideas, and I've been meaning since I won Worlds to be like to give back to the community to help people get better, and then I just like get log jammed on how much there is in the game. And obviously it's going to vary a lot by players, right? Of you know what's your personality type, how do you approach the game, and where would your big goals be or whatever. Um, I mean, I think the thing that I'm frequently frustrated with in conversations with people on the internet is that they are way too overconfident in what they believe and what they think they know. And so having a little more space for uncertainty and doubt and kind of you have a 60 card deck, you have a 70 card deck, whatever the hell size deck you have, and essentially like like people send me decks and like they have their 10 card sideboard already fleshed out. I have never had a sideboard ready before a tournament. Never, not once. Because my main deck is still in flight. I'm still switching, I'm still juggling with what shape I want my deck to be in. And then, and having that kind of working on that flexibility and finding things that you're confident in. Like if I build a deck, I almost always have a 4x card that's like the first card on the deck list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this Urban deck, it was 4x Aaron's Trial. It wasn't actually 4x Aaron's Trial. It was 4x Twisting Enter Inferno, 4x Combined Firepower. And then as I iterated on it and I thought about what I wanted it to do, it became 4x Aaron's Trial, and that was the card I identified with. Um, but you have the things you're sure in and the things you're unsure in, and that you kind of that interplay between those things is where you have to arrive at to finish your deck to submit it for a tournament. But in the lead up to that point, those games like the art of I heard a really good line way too long ago not to actually get it precisely correctly. But trading card games are about the art of extrapolating from statistically insignificant information, right? You never
Right.
have enough data to actually be sure of anything you can say in a card game because you're flipping coins, right? And to be sure that your coin is 50-50, you need hundreds of trials, even before we get into how it's, yeah, even to judge something at that level of granularity. Um,
The Gabriel
and
Nassif
so,
example is probably the best one, right? Where it was literally five coin flips in a row or something he had to hit.
yeah,
Four out of five.
yeah. Um, Yeah, I think that was like he had like 1 in 3, and he had to win. Yeah, like 4 out of 5 on the best one of the three.
Yeah.
Preposterous odds. Um,
And yeah, that one has its own like totally branching math because there's a point where once he hits the one cost like two times in a row, he then has to like or he hits the two cost two times in a row, whatever. It has to be the one cost, right? Because it's a one, a
yeah,
two, and an eight. And there, I'm gonna confuse so many people who don't know Magic. But if you don't know, just tag me on Discord. I'll send you the link. It's one of the most iconic, if not the most hype Magic the Gathering moments ever, and it's all completely RNG based. And it's the kind of thing that you play card games for at the end of the day. It's just this was like concentrated down into into a liquid and injected straight into your veins.
yeah, yeah, and send up the. I think MTG Remy did a music video on it too. Like it's a iconic moment in Magic history. It truly, like beyond many iconic moments, you could say that this is really something. But yeah, like no, and I think there's a lot of space to be gained in kind of studying the game and just trying to figure out and trying to do the math to figure out the spots. But also, I think you can make a big mistake of because you're doing the math, being certain that the math was correct, that you were doing the correct math, and there's getting rigorous knowledge about the game by saying, well, oh yeah, this deck is like 66% chance to win here or whatever. There's probably a lot more that could go into the game. So the game states can be so complex, right? Like Smiling Titan seems simple, especially like the safety eights and forward Smiling Titan that Justin was playing in like. But then you play against Knott's Flask, and now it's well, instead of winning in 2 hits, I'm winning in 3 hits sometimes. It depends. Or like, what if they block my Colossus Titan attacks? What if they gain some health in here? Like, uh, which is I guess why it's so hard to improve the UFS sometimes. But
Right. But and that's because that's one thing for me as a content creator. I've definitely thought about doing the how to play and how to improve, and I've started to do like these little technique videos where I can try to condense like one little idea and present it in just hopefully a really simple way. Because every time I've tried to give someone advice, or every time I see a play where I'm like, oh, this doesn't make sense, man, hold on, especially when I've done coaching and things like that. Shout outs to my Patreon. Please go check it out. If there's so many times where I'm like, wait, hold on, we have to pause. Let me see your hand. Why are we making this decision? Because my immediate feedback is, oh, this is a bad play for this reason, yada yada. But then if I look at their hand and I get the full information when we're playing a practice game, it's like, oh, well, this actually is the best play. This is like the correct way to play it out. And so just observing, especially because 90%, if not every bit of the streamed content that we have does not involve hand cams. It does not involve like full game information. Trying to extrapolate good information from that is often incredibly difficult. Same thing with looking at a deck list. If no one makes a deck profile and says, I cited this out every game, how would you know that this card wasn't actually good? That's another thing going back to like every good tournament run, every championship deck almost always is like, well, I should not have played this card at all. And so for me personally, the thing that I've come around to is very much in line with what you're talking about, and that is listen to other players. Just I used to say copy other players and net deck people was actually the best way to learn. Oh, my light went again. I keep kicking the cord. But so I tell people a lot. Just net deck other players, figure out why they play what they play. Put yourself in that situation. Same thing if I think a deck is too good. If I want to know how to beat Smiling Titan, playing Smiling Titan does a lot of that. And I've heard a lot of players will immediately dismiss it and go, well, I don't need to play that cringe deck to understand how it works. And, oh, it's so obvious. This was an Ojiro thing. Oh, it's so obvious how to play Ojiro. Why would I ever need to play it to understand like what it's weak to? It's so obvious what it's weak to. And it's like, you find out a lot of different gaps where you go, okay, well, actually, double jab pummel is really strong into my deck because I have no way to stop a combo. All I do is block for defense. Little things like that will really expose, where you can attack these decks. And so I've evolved from net deck other people to just listen to them, because I've taken other people's lists and I've modified them, and I go, oh, okay, actually I can't be greedy and just cut this card, or oh, now I understand that, the situations where I needed hacker extraordinaire over pass through walls, right? The one time cancel versus a permanent solution. And on top of that, maybe the hardest pill to swallow is you should listen to players that are worse than you. You should listen to them because they will give you insight, and they love to talk about the game too. Like, no offense to anybody out there, but a lot of, I'm definitely not talking about anyone specific, but when I was new to the game, when I was a bad player, I would love to go on the forums and just post deck list after deck list and go, please give me feedback. I get a million Discord messages whenever people join the game for like the first month. If they're anyone who is like watching my content first, they're sending me like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And they'll give you so much insight, not only onto how other people play the game, but where like people's strategies come from. Because I've heard so many players get into the game and they're like, well, I like this card because it's fast. And you're like, the text on it's garbage. Don't, just give speed to another attack. And yet, what you're learning about this player is they're not navigating speed hate correctly because they're overvaluing printed speed. And you can help them learn by listening to what they like about a card. And you can learn that, okay, if I want to play slower cards, I need to play interaction that beats speed hate. I need to play cards that target foundations, right? That flip foundations, or whatever it is. But the most recent one I've run into in my personal life was someone who just really liked 5 speed mids. And they were like, it's the only way I ever hit anybody. And we were like, okay, man, let's get you some target seal cards, let's get you heroes upbringing, and then we can play some card draw cards, and it worked out. But it took understanding where they were coming from. And not only will that help you grow your scene and help newer players as well, and it'll help you play against other players in tournament.
Yeah, I think playing against other players is a fantastic way to learn too. I wouldn't be half the player I am if I hadn't played a bunch of tournaments all over the freaking continent and played against the ATL guys and gotten to experience their way of seeing the game, and then kind of took their decks, iterated on them or whatever, and then saw the game from inside their eyes, and saw like, oh, we can count up damage here, right? We can play Shield Ram, we can play all this stuff. And I was very much a TV combo player. I wanted my deck to do something funny. That was my first rule. But then I was like, well, this deck's so lame. He's just like putting damage on his stupid attack, and I just like, it's so lame. It's like I played with it a little bit and got playing with Tim Keefe is also phenomenal because he's a very aggressive. He's kind of the aggro player, and he's kind of just no nonsense. I want to play interesting games where my number's better or whatever, and then I can try to adopt that, try to incorporate that kind of vibe and experience the game that way myself, and then it's turned out well for me.
Yeah, Tim Keefe is the guy who I've only played a few times, and mostly I think every time I've played him has been like 2020 format. It would have been like online. It would have been never in person. I don't think we ever played in person. And so it would have been like exactly during pandemic era. And every time I played him, I just remember my stage is no longer like how I play defense. Like, there's so many times where I would build down to 2 cards and I would go, okay, I'm safe because I've got this and I've got this and I've got this. And he would play an attack, and he's not even committing or sealing them. He is just enhancing in ways that are confounding me and making me not sure if I should be able to use my defense. Or like if I have a reset, he's putting attacks to the exact number where I go, okay, it's not worth it to use, and he's not going to invest anymore. And it's incredible. It's absolutely like a game changer. It's so eye-opening every time I've played him. And it's only been like 2 times. And both times I went, wow, I cannot, like, this is so weird to think about. But sometimes you have to hold vast strength for a mid block, and I cannot tell a new player when that is.
Yeah.
I can't tell
Yeah.
you when you should not play Vast Strength into your stage. But there are times where just holding a +3 mid block instead of your opponent just going, okay, well, I'm going to seizing the advantage, or Dragon Strike is probably it right now, right? They're going to just play a Dragon Strike, and they're going to flip the Vast Strength, and I'm not going to have a mid block. When if they had flipped anything else, it wouldn't matter in this board state, right? So those are the small percentage plays you're thinking about, right? Those are when you say extrapolating seemingly insignificant information. It's such a level 0 decision to play that Vast Strength, even against a Ryukyu deck, right? Like you're like, okay, well, at least I'll get to negate the abilities on Dragon Impact or something like that, and it plays exactly one mid attack. So even if they draw it, this is blank. So like, why put yourself in that position? I don't know. It's been the hardest thing for me as a player, even 10 years in, where I want to play all my best defensive pieces, especially my
Hmm.
defensive piece, and yet I never pay attention to my block zones. I never I always feel like I can fix it later. I can card draw out of it later. A lot of times I can bluff that I have it. People never expect you to hold 3 mids against a Falling Skies deck if you play 2 high blocks. You know what I'm saying? Like, why would I play 2 high blocks, right? So I've gotten away with a whole lot of skullduggery by just not paying attention to what I'm holding. But Tim Keefe is that player that showed me, like, I have to play from my hand, not my.
Yeah, I love the yeah, like know the I think maybe a good one, a good like bite-sized takeaway is like know the cost of following the rules, right?
Yeah.
Like my deck had 34 mid blocks in it and like 9 low blocks, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, the
You can check the
Rochester
math.
guys are notorious for playing sub 10 low blocks. So I'm putting it out there. I'm signal blasting it. We're bringing Mirio back. We're spending pony counters on zone changing. We're no longer clearing the card pool.
Ooh man,
Sean,
I would respect so much if someone got me with that. That would be I would really be happy to get exploited in such a heinously one-sided way. Like my birds are coming home to roost, and I have no one to blame for this loss but myself. Like that'd be I would love to earn the L like that.
I think
I just got to dodge those matchups and play Spine Titan instead.
you gotta, yeah, and what you gotta do is, because of the Universes Games Network deck list style, you got to make sure that when you add the cards, you add the low blocks like spread out throughout, so they're not clumped up. Because it
I
doesn't give
see.
you like a
So they can't
count. It
tell.
doesn't
They don't have
organize
UFS
it.
Ultra. They can't tell.
Yeah, so they're just because when we
Ooh,
were
yeah.
doing online stuff and we had the open deck list for the first time, they would show you like a printout. Like, I think it was like a screenshot of the deck list from UVS Ultra or whatever. And I am a notorious difficulty sorter. I sort everything by difficulty so I can read it and understand it and it makes sense in my head. And that helps people organize information. And I would see other people's deck lists and they're all super like, when I add my cards, I go by difficulty order too. I go left to right on action, asset, whatever. But I try
Yeah, sure,
to
sure.
look at, what are my 3 diffs first, what are my 2 diffs, what are my ones and zeros, because the ones and zeros are usually the most commonly overlapped, right? And I try to figure my deck out, like, what's my top end to my bottom end. Um, and when I would look at other people's deck lists for tournaments, I would just be like, all right, this is incredibly difficult to parse. Everything's everywhere. It can't be fixed as the last card added to the deck list, like they just remembered the day of, and stuff like that. So I think about compartmentalizing information a lot as being like maybe the primary skill of the game, or at least the
It's
one
very
that.
powerful. Yeah, yeah. Like being able to break down the game into more manageable chunks. I remember actually I was talking. I happened to bump into Constantine at the airport on our way out of Atlanta, and I forget exactly what he asked me, but he said I was in this spot XYZ happened, and like, what? How would you approach that? I think he might have played Elder Toguro and was like fighting a Ghidorah or something. I
Yeah.
could be matching the crap out of this. Um, but he had some complicated words that he said, well, like, just how would you approach it? And then I had to go through security, so I had a couple minutes to think about it. And we got back to the other side of it, and I said to him, so I think what happened is that, like, what your mistake was here was that I asked him, like, how hard were you thinking about this, or like how was you? And he said, I was completely exhausted. I was zonked out of my mind. I was like, it was way too much, and I was just exhausted. And it's like, yes, so that's what happens all the time, and that's what happened to me in Atlanta. Was I know I punted one game where I literally like checked a 2, but had a play in my hand that was one easier difficulty, which would have won, and so I was just exhausted from the sequence of events to get to that point. And the more you can reduce that strain on your head, on your brain, I was saying 10 minutes ago, oh yeah, like the best thing you can do is to be flexible and to think and to have a wider open milieu of options. But at the same time, there's a cost to that too, because the more options you have, the less you have already decided what you're doing, and the harder you have to think about it every time. It's like there's no real there's no free lunch here either. Yeah, because you have to be able to change your mind about stuff, even though you have to be able to be open-minded about what's important. At the same time, you have to be able to actually keep enough available energy to work through what's important in the spots where it is important.
Yeah, it's super weird to think about, because I try to think about when I was a newer player, and I was lucky I had Shane Duckworth. Shane Duckworth was able to guide me to powerful cards sooner than most. And I think that is not always the best way to teach people, but he didn't do it like ham-fisted. He didn't like tell me, oh, don't play these cards, play this instead. He would almost always just put the physical card down in front of me, which was the wildest part. He had every card on his person at all times. Like, I think it was a full year of knowing him before I watched him use UFS Ultra, because he would just have the card with him. It was the most insane thing. But so the granted, there was only like 3 sets out at the time, but still. But he would put the card out, and he would just be like, "Why don't you play this? This is what it does. This is the card it interacts with," And I remember a huge learning moment for me was bringing an evil Dimitri deck to a local, and it was probably right after Skullman and Gemini Man got banned, because everyone was dooming that the format's going to be 2 decks and what else is the point. And I think I had just also decided to either play Felicia or Gemini Man, because I felt like Felicia was right there, and my Felicia Gemini matchup was very even. I don't know. Anyways, but so
I love Felicia.
Yeah, but so the meat of the story is I brought an evil Dimitri list, and Shane had a life Dimitri list, which ended up being very much the list that just about everybody was running. Obviously, differences here and there, like there always is for our game. And I was like, yeah, I have like 50 cards in here that are life and evil. And the evil specific cards are really low impact. They're like my least favorite cards anyways. And he showed me like the power of using 8,000 degrees in like one matchup. Like we played like a head-to-head, and it was literally like 1 card difference. That was like, well, over the course of 2 turns, he had 8 extra life from like 2 copies of 8,000 degrees. And I was really lucky that I had a player like Shane to show me that. And for lack of a better term, I just did everything he said because he was a better player than me. I didn't fight back on it. I get like weird kickback when I go to ask, like people ask me for help, and I'm like, no, you shouldn't play that card. It doesn't do enough. And they're like, are you sure? But it does what I'm like, well, then run it, But like I said, you know what? You're right. This list is, I think it was legitimately less than 10 cards different, and one of the cards was probably a card I shouldn't have been playing anyways. It was some evil action. I can't remember, but
yeah,
it was like it didn't even work the way I wanted it to, right? So like overnight, I had the help of someone take my deck from being what would have been probably a bubbling out train wreck that was close to greatness, and it felt so good in testing because I'd never played a character as broken as Dimitri. You know, this
It's
is
so good.
this is my first competitive event, and all I have to do is read your stage each turn and flip the best one, so I don't have to worry about it. Amazing beginner character. Uh, it 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 probably isn't overall just because you have to identify good foundations, but it is in the sense that you don't have to deal with them once you do. So,
Yeah,
uh,
like having your opponent's board state get simplified every turn is a great edge. If they're playing like if they're playing a bunch of jank and you just pick the one good one, like
right.
poof, now their board does nothing.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, back then, especially as far as Dimitri's offense was concerned, there really wasn't too many targets in most stages, right? So you were
Yeah,
just flipping their best
yeah,
offensive output.
yeah, because you do a lot of throws, and that was a very speed centric meta. And Dimitri's kind of opts out of it and says, I'll have some throws, I'll have some multiples, whatever.
Yeah, I think I was flipping caught red-handed and Ophidiophobia the most, right? Like those were the most flips. So prototype, always flip prototype though. Uh, but so I had the help of like someone in that deck. The only person I lost to playing that deck was you playing Athena twice, once in round 7, once in semifinals, and I remember in between those 2 rounds, I talked to Brandon Jones, who was also playing Life Dimitri, probably 3 cards different. And I was like, man, I just don't know what to do. My caught red handed can cancel Superior Technique or Karami Dama or one other card draw card. And he said, just flip Deforester. And I was like, oh, you're right. That does make sense. That is like what he used the most. And he's like, yeah, you just flip Deforester. And then we both lost to that deck, anyways, I'm pretty sure, because flipping Deforester was not the only answer, right? So
Yeah, it was a step. It wasn't all you needed. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because I remember after that tournament, people were like, "Wow, man, you just like ran. You had like the bad bracket matchup or whatever. Like you lost to Dimitri at the end." It's like I was 6 out of 7 against Dimitri on the weekend. I beat all of the other ones. It just you can't win them all.
yeah, it's just and it's so and that was I also remember talking about, extrapolating small information. You had like 2 cards left in your deck at one point, and I went through your discard pile and I was like, okay, well, there's no leaf shield here, and he's gone through so much of his deck. And I got so mad after that event because, spoiler, not only did I try to play around the leaf shield perfectly, but you didn't block a throw with leaf shield. You blocked Kersplat with leaf shield. And so the breaker one made me fail the throw, which I never expected in my life. I was like, if I get the throw down, I can actually, force this through with with the speed pump. And I went back and I saw the list later. And I was like, the motherfucker only ran 1 leaf shield. You were just holding it the whole game, and that was like game
Whole game.
1.
I remember holding Leaf Shield the whole game. Yep.
Yeah, and so that was
The
like the
deck
first
draws
time we
30
had
cards.
played. And then the next games, I kept looking for the leaf shields, and I was like, man, this guy just always has it. And like when you draw your whole deck, like it's so much easier. But I never expected one because everyone who played leaf shield at the time was playing like 3 or 4. It's an omni blocked out attacks. That's like insanely good for that format. It I don't think Rain Flush was out yet, but it might
Oh
have been.
yeah, they were paired. They
They were
were
together,
married.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like it's the easiest setup for a Rain Flush, right? So every Rain Flush deck was playing like 4 of it. And yeah, I just remember being so mega tilted because like no one I had ever played against playing those symbols was on 1 leaf shield. It's little tiny things like that if I had picked up on, and if I had checked better, admittedly,
Yeah.
uh, then
That's and yeah, check yeah, it's so that's the hardest thing about universes is that even if there's always the haze, right? There's always the fog of battle. There's always the fog of war. There's always if I just checked better, it'd have been fine. Did I make the right call or not? And you get bailed out.
yeah,
It was like set 3 My Hero Academia before I realized that if I have 2 attacks in my hand, right, and I have a +2 speed in my stage, and I can say either I'm gonna bet we both check 5s or we both check 3s, right? I can say I want to not speed bump my attack so I can pass my next card on a 3 check, or I can +2 speed and say you have to check a 5 to live, and then I can try to check a 5 to go after that anyway. That you should pump the speed. You should bet on checking 5s because your decks have more 5s than 3s. Like
right.
it took me. I was playing a testing match and I punted it and then I won anyway. And I was like, what is the right answer there? And like let me like work it out because it was very. I hadn't ever even just getting to a spot where it actually simplifies down that far is so uncommon that you can be wrong for so long and not even know. And that's the hardest part about Universe is that it's so complicated. There's so much going on. The cards are so good and the games are so big and open and complex that you know. And that's the beauty of it too is that you can have a giant hole in your game and skirt by just fine as long as the right cards are legal, the right things are important at the right times. But eventually, if you do go back and do your homework, figure out little things, they will pay off eventually.
I wonder, is Universes the most roguelike card game? Because it's still not a roguelike because you can't add things. Well, I guess you have a sideboard, but I don't think that counts.
I've I remember people talking about like how like earlier this summer or whatever, talking about how hard it is to make a UFS like client, Universes client,
Yeah.
for a PC or whatever. And I was like, I could make Bellatra Universes and be the sickest thing. I think
That
it would
would.
be, and like that's on the docket somewhere. That's on the project's back burner of let's try to do this. And cause I don't have to program all cards. I just have like kind of if you play the Briarwoods, I love the Briarwoods. I'm so
Yeah.
excited that there's more Briarwoods coming.
Me too.
Like I don't have to have a AI that plays the game. I just have to like I can have it just roll dice and pick one of the four cards in the bot deck of am I going to play a 5 mid 5 or a 3 high 8 or a 4 low 4 or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be complicated, and then it's like it randomly blocks too, sure. And
Yeah.
then you build your deck. The game shuffles your deck for you. You can add cards to your deck. You can put items on your cards. Like it'd be hype.
Yeah, I'm very excited
But
for the boss battle design space. I've waffled on doing like fan made stuff only because I know that the people who design it at Universe's Games can't look at it. And if they come across it, they become ideas that they can't do. So I figured if I were to do some, then staying away from known universes, intellectual properties would be a good way to like go about that. But at the same time, it feels kind of disconnected too, right? Like people who are hype about universes are generally hype about Godzilla or My Hero or now Attack on Titan, right? The IPs are definitely doing a lot of the heavy lifting for bringing in new eyes and new players. So I'm in kind of a weird place with that, but I think that that's like a place that's ripe for player driven format, I guess, player created custom games. And going back to like how do you get new players in? Playing with them is always something I think that's underrated. Playing cooperatively is super duper underrated even in today's world, like online co-op for video games is something that people complained about for what felt like forever, and it's still like it's coming back in like squad based gameplay a lot, like the 4 player teams and stuff like that. I think Helldivers was probably the most recent phenomenon with it.
yeah, big one like
And
that.
it seems like such an obvious recipe for success. I feel like the two biggest things are you either need to have a cooperative experience or a commander experience. And if you can have both, like that's like if you're gonna make a new card game today, honest to God, your set one should have rules for a commander style game. I think Flesh and Blood did it like set 2 or something, like when it like peaked popularity, it the first thing they did was okay, how do we make a 4 player like casual format? Star Wars debuted basically with Twin Suns. I heard about Twin Suns at the same time I learned how to play the game. So have you not heard of Twin Suns?
I had not considered Twin Suns universes
Oh, okay, yeah. Twin Suns Universes is kind of nice.
because I've been thinking through this whole preview season. If we want to segue into that for a minute, holy
Yeah,
crap! I was thinking like, man, how cool would Historia plus Krista be? How cool would Erwin and Erwin be?
you're just talking
And
about
like,
character stacking.
that's not on the table anymore, but it'd be really cool.
That might be a way because I've tried to get people to play 100 decks singleton. I've tried to get people to play 60 deck 4 player. I don't know if it's just like the TTS thing, if it's the online thing, because playing Commander over webcam is not for me personally. Webcam
Yeah.
doesn't bug me too much, but it's not my relax and play a casual uh game of cards way to play. So, but if combining 2 characters was a way to get like a 4 player game down, I'm super here for it because I still think that it is not that difficult, especially their wording cards in Attack on Titan 1 and 2 and Critical Role. They're wording cards to be multiplayer friendly. And I think as a community, we should take advantage of that.
Yeah, I still really believe in triple threat. I have not been pushing triple threat as much as I should be. Big fan of triple threat, and I think the biggest problem almost with universes multiplayer is just the intensity, right? It's just so much of it is so, you know, there's so much math that you kind of feel obliged to do, and there's so much like you almost have to take it personally if you ever lose, right? Because someone like broke your walls, like someone
Someone
beat
attack
you
you, yeah.
personally. Yeah. Um, but I really like triple threat really kind of balances it because it kind of it's really hard to make a plan in triple threat in the first place because you kind of just have to throw stuff at the wall and there's 2 people defending it. So like it's hard to you kind of just have to relax a little bit and say, well, what's going to happen is going to happen. My favorite move at triple threat is it's like taking my pants off, overextending, and saying, well, listen, I got 1 card in my hand. I'm like halfway tapped out, guys. One of y'all can kill me if you can.
You guys get
Good
to
luck.
fight over it, yeah. And like, and if you swing and miss, the other guy definitely kills you, right? So
Yeah.
you got to be careful. You get some kingmaker situations. People always like worry about the issues with multiplayer, but that's always a rule zero thing. I've never played a 4 plus player card game because when I grew up playing card games, it's super funny to think about now. But more than playing at a store in tournaments, I almost never played like outside of the Pokemon League. That was just like me, my sister, and sometimes 2 other kids at a Barnes and Nobles. There was like never league play for any of the games I played. They were never supported, and we were always just usually hanging out at the store to go back to someone's house, and we would play like one
Yeah.
game at the store, buy some snacks, whatever, maybe buy a pack, and then we would go back to someone's house. And every time we played like 6 person multiplayer. And we did it for Raw Deal, we did it for Lord of the Rings, we did it for Warlord, we did it for Star Wars, Decipher Star Wars. It just seems so normal and natural to me, and like I learned to play Warlord and Lord of the Rings as multiplayer games. I actually technically don't know the single player rules, but I assume that they're like the same. And so I might just have a very unique situation because to me, I've lived through the guy who sits down, shuffles his deck and goes, "Fuck you, you owe me $5. I'm going to kill you and then I'm going to leave the game." Like that's my growing up experience. And is that cool or fun? No. But is it funny because you're doing it with your friends and it's not a random fucking person from off the street? Yes. Like it's the people you play with. You know what I mean? Um, there was literally his name is Jack, and he's a real person, and he played a character who in Raw Deal sends 2 attacks that are unblockable, and then he's blank for the rest of the game. And he would just go, "Who is the first person to piss me off today? You get 2 unblockable attacks, you die, I concede." And it was like, he's the prototypical why would you want to play with this person, but he was like everyone's friend, and you probably did piss him off and deserve it. Like you probably did something to deserve it, right? He didn't sit down and just pick people at random, except that one time when he wanted to go see a movie. But like it's not a big deal to me. So people hem and haw over, well, what happens if you all beat up on one person? And it's like, get better friends. You just get better friends. I don't play with Jack anymore.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I should give like 4 player more of a shot because like yeah like part of the game is the politicking. Part of the game is being like, well, I helped you out earlier. Can you help me out now, even though I'm going to win? Like, can you do
Right.
a little kingmaker? Like, just a little kingmaker? Yeah, like that's it's cool. Yeah, it's people you play with, and I thought the gem of insight that really got me excited about Triple Threat way back when we brewed it up, like in Street Fighter era, was precisely that you could just sit down with three people, and as long as everyone was committed to winning and willing to not willing to kind of obey like that rule zero of don't gang up on someone and say either one of us is going to win, that's fine. Because I think that's toxic. That's toxic for the game experience. Um, if you're all willing to equally play as equals, then like just the tension of UFS really holds that game together. Really, you have to calculate a lot. You have to put yourself in spots. You have to be willing to lose, but as long as if you say I'm willing to lose, I'm going to put myself in a position to lose, but then you guys still have to balance against each other. That's still a very interesting and dynamic game, and oftentimes you won't lose because they'll realize they can't win going through your little like your health total, and hurting you puts the next guy in better position to win. I think that's the big key is like then your vulnerability then becomes a liability to them, and so they have to play to prolong the game then after that.
Yeah, I
Um,
also think people underestimate when teaming up is just beneficial to the format. Because think of all the
mm,
decks that are just like impossible to wall out or else you get back swung. And now you can just say, hey man, I'm not going to commit all the way out and show my whole ass, but I'm going to play like three attacks. If you play three attacks, neither of us are defenseless, and we might actually hit Rodan this turn cycle. Like it solves problems for you too.
my favorite match of triple threat I've played so far was I played with Nick Reagan and Jeffrey Kahn at the Vegas regional last year. I played Ochako. He played and Nick played Sato, and Jeff was on Overhaul. And we're just like, you get paid for enhanced steps, and you're really lame. We're just gonna fight, and you can kind of like block
Yeah.
for us. Cool, cool.
Yeah, I'm not letting you build a free attack on every turn, right?
It was like 4 or 5 turn cycles, and it was dynamic as hell. Like I think everyone was on like check to win, or like either someone could fail a block, or they could check. They checked a 3, they could have checked a 5, they could check one better, they could check a 4 and would have won. And all three of us got that opportunity, and like the appropriate decks bailed whoever was getting on the brink of getting killed got bailed out of that spot. So like it was a phenomenal game. And it was like kind of pick up with like two like mid tier aggro decks and a good defense deck, like good like mid range like control like what's the stupid Bromley card? Future Charge deck.
Future
Future Charge
charge.
passing the torch like lame, but we all it got to do a little bit of Future Charge aggro a little bit in some spots. So it was
Yeah, I
when
think that
UFS is good, it's so good. It's so good.
yeah, I think so like the big benefit of multiplayer is supposed to be that you are generating way less non-games. The amount of non-games
Yeah.
from multiplayer is supposed to be like I guess casual multiplayer because you have CEDH too, and a lot of
And
people
well,
would
yeah,
consider those non-games in general, but a lot of CEDH players wouldn't feel that way. So, um,
yeah. It flattens the power level, right? Because if I have an overpowered deck and the table recognizes this, I'm now playing on extreme hard difficulty, right? I'm playing three
right.
versus one, and maybe I'll still win because my deck's that good or whatever. But if I'm playing some jank, the fact that it's jank means I'm not going to get as much attention, and so blah, 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 blah. And yeah, as you say, like it's even if your cards are bad, you're going to have a shot where you're going to be in the right position to do something with them, and it doesn't matter that it's that bad when your cards are positioned in the right spot.
Yeah, like you can if the person in Magic, the person who's not ramping and misses land drops probably isn't getting beat up on unless they're being like unless someone else at the table is goading another player or something and like there's no other target, right? There's no other like good defenseless target. But even then, both the other players should do everything they can to beat up on the goading player, right? Um, the only commander game I've ever actually finished, I played Braids, Bromley's deck, and I did nothing. I did so little of anything, and people just didn't want to lose the Braids trigger because I was getting nothing from it. I was dropping like fuck all of anything from Braids for free. I was dropping islands and stuff, and I already had an artifact that made all my islands tap for 2, and it was
Yeah,
duplicating itself every turn. So I was just getting like insane island ramp. I had 27 blue by the end of the game, and my board was a 1/1 soldier token that Barrett gave me. You know, like so, and that's how I won the game. He had 1 health and he couldn't block the soldier token. But so like I had no business winning the game. My deck's not doing anything except helping Colby put 17 creatures on the board, and like it was it was confusing. I had no idea what any of the cards did. I've never read any of these magic cards before. I'm literally just trusting someone across the table to explain to me if they're ever affecting me for any reason. We ended up playing a card where every time you play a card, it goes into a pool of other cards, and you have to pick a
Oh
card from that
God.
pool to play instead. And it was the
You got
most
pooled.
confusing, ridiculous board state of all time. I have no idea what the rules are for any of this shit, and I still had an absolutely great time because you're there with friends and everyone's taking it like at an even pace. And if they wanted to, my blue deck that has 1/2/2 creature for the majority of the game could have gotten stomped out in a heartbeat. I took two different attacks from from like 45 health down to like literally 1 health one time and like 4 the other time because I had an Aetherflux Reservoir on turn 1. That's the one thing Braids gave me, was it gave me the Aetherflux like turn 2 or whatever. And so every time I'm like countering something or playing a draw spell or whatever, I would get close to 50 and then they'd knock me to 1. And like they just didn't have to eliminate me because I'm not doing that much of a threat, right? So they should have in retrospect, but anyways, to me that's the main appeal of multiplayer, is you eliminate non-games to like single digit, percentages. And the extreme other end of that is people gang up on someone, and that's like probably still not a non-game because you probably had a reason to gang up on them. um it's probably not the person who's doing poorly that you're ganging up on. So like I just never really worried about stuff like that. um and I don't know. I think that this is an easy enough game to adapt to multiplayer. I would love to see more multiplayer. Triple threat as a side event is really really cool, but I would really like to see like 4-player elimination. That's my jam, is the elimination, to see like who's standing. I think you probably do end up with more kingmaker situations that way. But at the same time, you know, leveraging that sort of power is like what let me win that game with Braids, right? If it was a
Yeah.
first KO game, I would have lost for sure. My deck wouldn't be viable, right? It wouldn't be playable in that format. So, um, I don't know. I've been a big fan of trying to get like a casual multiplayer thing going because I think in today's day and age, I know more people who play Commander than know what Liliana of the Veil is. Like truly, I brought up Liliana like and was like, here's this iconic magic card, and they recognized that it's the name of an alt art for some anime girl that like one of their friends has, but have no clue who Liliana the character is. You know what I mean?
God.
Like the commander format has changed so much of what card games means to people, and like people's
Yeah.
perception. Like people used to think of card games like, I'm going to the Pokemon League and I get to challenge people, and like they think of Yu-Gi-Oh where like you're gonna go and shuffle your deck and adjust your glasses and pull out a trap card, and like it's not that. It's going to the
We
Boba
got
Tea
those
shop.
now.
Huh?
We got trap cards now.
Yeah, we do actually have literal trap cards now. But my friends go to the boba tea shop and they play over, coffee and tea for a couple hours, and it's not like they go to card shops to buy cards, but they never play there. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they don't
You,
sign
you
up
got me
for
thinking about
weeklies.
I want to play I want to try to like play some pickup games of like four player pickup games of the Challenger deck series format.
Yeah.
It's like that sounds like it could have some potential. I'm intrigued.
4-player starter deck seems like a decent enough way to be like, all right, what's the power level?
Yeah.
Because that's always my big thing too, is like way more so than worrying about like whose deck is, or like more so than worrying about like who's gonna team up against who. I hate the my deck is a 7 discussion. I hate, like, the one thing I praise CEDH players for more than anything is they don't have like the rule zero discussion, I guess, or whatever it's called. where you have to
Yeah.
sit down and go, okay, well, my deck does this and this and this, and I played this card, and nothing is a surprise, and if I win, it's going to be with this card, so watch out for whatever shenanigans. And then you actually play the game, and all the cards they didn't mention are also broken, and no one feels like everyone feels like the winner's deck is the most powerful or whatever. Like, I hate it. I hate trying to figure out what power level everyone's deck is.
Yeah, that seems honestly, yeah, like I have not played any commander in like 5 or 8 years or something. And I think it's kind of ultimately because of that. Is like I had like a little group I hung out with a little bit. I didn't know that well, but I was like, yeah, let's go play commander, sure. And then like the people who I went there with in the first place like stopped showing up at all. I was like, yeah, I'll go again for a couple weeks. And it was like I was winning way too much, and it was like I was playing basically I was playing literally a starter deck, and they were playing just like decks that were worse than because this was like in 2017 or something. So I remember I was playing
Like the first
the
precon.
the ready precon,
Okay,
like the
yeah, yeah.
artifacts, like very Broberg's deck.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like, yeah, I played Beer Battlesphere and then beat the table with Mere Battlesphere. It's like, I don't think I'm supposed to beat the table with Beer Battlesphere, but
Is that
and then I'm kind of felt bad about it, and then feeling bad about beating people too much is a very toxic emotional experience of relating to a game, and so that it's like I don't want to go like play a second against people who are going to feel like that way about beating up my shitty deck, and then do I really want to build more decks with this as my basis for experience? And it's kind of didn't vibe with wanting to have the rule zero my decks to 7 conversations,
Is
and
Mirror
like navigating that
Battlesphere?
seems so formidable.
That's just the one that makes more mirror creatures when you attack with it, right?
It just enters with 4 guys, and you can tap the guys to make them bigger.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah, yeah. So it's like understated, and then you just invoke all the dudes to make it like regular statted.
But yeah, like for a 7 drop, like it's like
Yeah,
an eight
okay.
seven that does 4 to the face,
Yeah,
like that.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
and 'cause it's like it's ready, so like it's kind of like Galvin Weld or like stack your artifact, bring it back kind of stuff.
Right.
Like get a bunch of triggers or whatever. But it's not a card that's supposed to do that.
Fair enough. It's not a win condition normally, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like it's like an army in a can, but it's not like fourth Eagle Dingus in a can,
it's not
right? Like
lethal.
not a good card in
Yeah.
like the real sense. It's
If
just
you
a
give
big
them
guy.
all, if you give them all haste, do you win the game? No.
No, yeah, or yeah, it's like I Thomas Gordon has this whole fucking spiel about how EDH and Commander are different things, or I think that's the theory he's going on. Like Mere Battlesphere is an EDH card. It's from like 2014, if even
Right.
that. I don't know. It's from 10
Okay.
years ago, and it's when cards weren't built for Commander, or it was like one of the first cards they built for Commander. Right? It's like it's supposed to be a standard ramp card, and then also you can put it in your Commander deck.
Okay, yeah, I guess it does give you a bunch of blockers, and there's lots of stuff to do with sack outlets in Commander, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's yeah, I just it whenever I sit down and play a Commander game, they've never finished until exactly this last Atlanta regional, and B, it's always like one deck is doing everything, so everyone has to focus on it. It doesn't matter what the power
Mm.
level of the decks are when they don't draw the good cards. It certainly doesn't matter the power level of your deck when you don't draw any lands or any ramp, and you're just behind on mana. So like,
Uh,
um,
yeah, like
the,
how many Wraths of God are going to be resolved this game? Like,
yeah.
is it
So
10?
I think if people are worried about that, for Universe's 4 player, it's such a non-issue. I even one of the games I played, we tried like not triple threat rules, but we tried a 3-player game, and
Okay.
exactly the issues people were afraid of happened. Someone made a resource denial deck that plays board wipes, and I don't even remember what they were doing, but it was truly annoying. It was truly like, man, this is suppressing our ability to play the game. So the other 2 people targeted that player, and then the person who went second got to attack the person who committed out to kill, to actually deal like the lethal blow to the person, destroying both of our stages. And it was like, well, this is exactly what happens when you are that guy. And like, that is what the multiplayer format is kind of for, though. Like, the deck he was playing was only suitable for a multiplayer environment. The only reason you would build it is for a multiplayer format, and then we theoretically solved the problem. And really, if we had the fourth player there, it wouldn't have been so black and white after that player was eliminated, right? You would have not gotten, you would have risked the domino effect of just saying, okay, well, I'm going
Mm.
to attack you and I'm going to lose because the fourth player goes. So it, I've lived through it, is what I'm trying to say, and it's really not that bad. That person's gonna play that deck one time. They're gonna get the shit kicked out of them for doing it, and then they're gonna pull out a different deck and play a different game, and it's not gonna be the end of the world. So I don't know. I would love to see four-player universes become a supported thing. I was really hoping with the lower decks product, because of the wording on a lot of the cards. I was really hoping that they were gonna like tease some rules with that, but I also think they're going to overhaul the actual rules pretty soon.
Mm.
So that might be something to wait for until we have like a new rule book. But
Yeah, I know one of the cards has the word diplomacy on it in its rules text, and that's like,
yeah,
diplomacy is certainly something we do a lot more in multiplayer.
right. Yeah, it's certainly the perfect kind of keyword, similar to like goad, right? Or
Yeah, at the very least, it's pushing in the direction of this is going to be good in multiplayer, even if it's doing something normal in heads up play.
right. Yeah, the what do they call it? The when you're the monarch, you have like the monarch crown and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is perfectly fine for single player, but it really comes alive for multiplayer. So I would love to see stuff like that. Um, Tekken has like all these little mini games. They have like Tekken bowling and Tekken volleyball and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a real part of the game. It's crazy. It's actually super funny. The bowling, I think, is actually just a bowling thing, but all the other mini games have been like you have to do fighting game moves to hit the volleyball and stuff like that. So I would love to see like goofy expressions of parts of the games like that. Like you could get like a Tekken ball asset, right? And every time you play an attack and it deals damage, you can send it to their stage, and like it has some effect while in the stage and when it enters, right? And there's so many like things that Magic is doing that's referential with Duskmorn, right? It's all very derivative from certain things. It's very obvious like what it's meant to be. But where it's hitting is the mechanics. The mechanics are flavorful and they're representative of what you would expect from like the horror movie tropes. And
Yeah,
a lot of the
that stuff's
stuff
phenomenal.
and a lot of the stuff that I see from Duskmorn is really only coming alive or really in not I'm not gonna say it's only enjoyable in multiplayer, but it really comes alive in multiplayer when one person has hidden information with the manifest, right? And everyone else is speculating on what it could be, and like they gotta pick, okay, well you attack first, because then if they manifest it, we'll save you. I've seen like that kind of stuff where people have to speculate, okay, well he's got the monster hiding under the bed, and a lot of the they have like a redirect spell in the set, and those are always super popular in Commander. And again, it's just the flavor comes alive in like a goofy way, in a way that a lot of these cards you wouldn't play in constructed, but they are like fun mini games in multiplayer, and that's what I really want to see 2025. I almost put, I really wanted to put it when Paul asked on Facebook, "What's one big impactful change you want to see for 2025?" I was really close to just saying make a multiplayer format, but I feel like that doesn't have to come from them. I feel like that doesn't have to be something that the company does. And if we're following in the footsteps of Commander, it almost, certainly shouldn't be. It should be like a fan made thing that gets adopted through the trial of time. Um, but I ended up putting like overhauling the rules slash like a judge program, because I think that would be the easiest, most impactful, if we're putting multiple levers on it. I think that would be the easiest slam dunk, to just have some form of judge program. I want to ask, did you respond to that thread at all? I know you're not much of a Facebooker. I only go there to
I have
promote
not
videos.
signed into Facebook this calendar year. That's not true at all. This month, anyway.
Still,
Yeah.
so let me ask you then, if there, we'll wrap it up with this unless there's any topics we missed that you want to address, but I want to wrap it up. I always like to do something optimistic, something forward thinking, something, optimistic towards the future. And I think one of the best ways to do it would be to ask you what is one impactful change Universe's games can make in 2025 to improve the player experience.
Yeah, I think having I don't know. I feel like I don't have a specific enough answer, but something in the domain of the rules, something to make that more accessible, something to make that more legible and less kind of arcane and Byzantine. Um, there are a bunch of. I know there was card preview today where people said, "Oh, it's gonna have to have a day one already." I said, "It seems fine to me." And they said, "Well, no, because actually, the response conditions are only the response condition has to be self-referential, not
That
just the ability. That's be the response condition
that has to
for
be
you
in
to be
the
able to play the
trigger.
response
Yeah,
at a funny time." And it's like, yeah, I guess the rules as written say that, don't they? Boy,
you
howdy, I miss when I could have an intuition about the rules, and this is coming from me,
yeah, you and
who
I both
knows
had
all the cards by heart, right? Like,
we had
this
that
is,
same moment in two different discords where I was
I
going, they were
know.
talking about needing card pool, and I was like, well, it references itself, and there because I'm salty over the Fajin ruling where because it's self-referential in the trigger it beats on play, which like doesn't feel right, but I've been shown the rules and I can't, my ken of the rules cannot argue. But so I'm like, well, this one is self-referential. It can at least work from discard. And they're like, no, it has to be self-referential in the trigger condition, which is I threw my hands up and I was like, all right, whatever. We need to errata it, I guess, because it references itself 4 words later than other cards, and I don't know if they should all work uniform, but it should be way more obvious. They should be using different words entirely, I feel like, if they are meant to trigger at different times or, be usable in different ways.
Yeah, and yeah, there's a million ideas, and executing on some of them would be really great.
Yeah.
You'd just be able to have clear intuition, that everyone be on the same page about what cards do, and I think that's the fundamental basis of the game is that everyone has to understand what the cards do and have that shared common understanding where you don't have a game engine. You play World of Warcraft and not understand what the opponent's skills does. You can't do that in Universe. You have to be able to form the game state kind of socially between the two players, since that's the
Yeah.
absolute bedrock of the game. And I wish it was a little easier to communicate to be able to understand people in that. So something in that space, I think it would definitely be the best thing I would focus on. I think, but like also, I don't know, man. I'm kind of too blown away by Attack on Titan to be able to say like, oh yeah, we need anything kind of in that dimension because like Attack on Titan was, yeah. I don't know, big fan.
Well, I'm glad I got you on here. I wanted to do this last week, but I'm glad we got you on here, Broberg. You're always a huge fan of the game. You're always one of the biggest supporters through the thick and the thin. And I know it's not always perfect, but you are someone I look to always find something to like about the game, even when I might be my most disconnected from it. So I appreciate you being sort of that bright light, that optimistic light, always trying to put a positive spin on things. Do you have any shout outs you want to give? I know we got Rochester CCG is sponsoring a lot of stuff going on right now. I need to give them a shout out because they sent me some retro boxes that I'm going to be opening on stream leading up to the Retro Wednesday webcam weekly at the end of this month. So I want to get through all the regionals and stuff like that. And as soon as UK is done, we're shifting to a retro focus. I'm really excited for
Let's go.
the new webcam retro events. But shout outs to Sean O'Brien. So thank you very much for sending me those boxes. I'll put them to good use in the webcam events. Is there any shout outs you got, Broberg?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Shout out to Sean O'Brien. Shout out to Rob 360. Shout outs to 2025, the year of retro. We're gonna make it happen. We should have talked about that. Honestly, I should have shoved that on the calendar.
It's gonna get
But
its own episode. We're gonna get its own episode.
oh, perfect. There we go. Yeah, shout out to all the creators in the community, all the people putting out the content. I've loved this preview season and all these. I've subscribed to a handful of new channels. I've mostly been subscribed to people already. I love seeing it. I would love to see more content from everyone. I gotta watch. I have a watch list. I haven't been keeping up on everything, but like watching the grind. Shout out to Cameron Cardwell and everything he's been doing. Watching the grind, kind of as you were saying, just see other people's experiences of the games. I changed my mind on Berthold a little bit this week. I was kind of poo-pooing him. Five hand sizes are stuck. Well, okay, I missed that he has 8 balanced fighters and 8 plus or minus 2 damages when he
Yeah.
cycles, right? Like
He's got that pony
just
draw.
miss things sometimes. But yeah, it's. I'm seizing up. What do I have any other shout outs? Shout outs to Universes Games. Game's great. I don't know.
Awesome. Well, don't go anywhere, guys. I'm gonna be right back here with David in just a moment. We got a special 2-part episode, so I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you again, Broberg, for joining us. I can't wait to see you at the next event. Are you playing in any of the webcam events? Do you have any of the online stuff that you go into? Are you planning to go to Nats? I guess you don't have to anymore.
I am still planning to go to Nats. I had such a great time last year, even scrubbing out of the main event so badly. I had a splendid time playing retro in person, and actually, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, we gotta repeat. Co-national champion retro. That's the goal for this year, I guess. Now, for
It's
sure, going
true,
Nats, and
boy.
I should. I ought to play this game more often. I ought to make use of the internet to actually play this game instead of just yapping about it on Discord, freaking 24/7. So we'll see how it turns out, though.
Hey, man, yapping's all I can do as a content creator, so that's sometimes yapping's better than nothing.
Yeah, true.
All right, man. Well, I'll see you in the
It's
next
been
one.
great. Thanks for having me, man.